Welcome, everyone, to our first episode of Babble. I am thrilled to be launching today with an interview with author Sue Nyathi. We will be talking about her career and her three brilliant books, The Polygamist, The GoldDiggers, and A Family Affair, all of which are a nuanced, sensitive, and thoroughly entertaining depiction of Zimbabwean life and of the Zimbabwean experience in South Africa. At one point, an investment analyst by day and a storyteller at all other times, we do have to question whether Sue ever actually slept. Hi, Sue. How are you doing?
Hi, Megan. I'm good, thanks. And thank you for inviting me onto your platform.
No, we're so excited to have you. Can you tell us where you are today, where we're sat?
So I'm I'm currently in Johannesburg, and this has been my home for the last 12 years now. So, we're having this conversation from my home. This is where I've spent most of my time since lockdown. So I live, work, and play at home.
The joys of lockdown. Have you been doing writing and things while you've been in lockdown?
Yes, I did. I actually started writing the sequel to The Polygamist.
Oh,
Uh,
exciting.
yeah, a lot of my fans have always wanted a sequel. And I think, for a long time, I didn't think I'd write one, but the idea actually came to me during lockdown. And so I started writing it then. So, I mean, I haven't written in a while, but, that's work in progress.
That's so exciting. I mean, you gave us a taster of a sort of sequel in that Lindani, one of the characters from The Polygamist, was in The
The
Gold
goal,
Digger.
yeah. I was trying to appease readers because for some reason they're so enthralled with that character. But now the pressure is to then bring her back into the sequel, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Weave it in. You'll have these multiple novels that aren't actually technically linked, but they are.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd love to start by talking about the earliest days as a writer. I know technically The Polygamist was your first novel, but actually I believe Sue's books were doing the rounds way before that when you were in high school. Can you tell the audience a bit about what those are?
So actually, I started writing, like you said, in high school. I wrote my first, what I call a novel. It was called Crazy Over You. I was 13, and it was, a high school romance. And it was written on an A5 exercise book. And I actually covered it. I put a cover, wrapped it up. I put a blurb, just the same way a normal book would be presented. And so I presented it the same way, except that it was handwritten. It wasn't typed.
Yeah.
But I think the vision was already there that, this is what I wanted to do. And I passed it around to my classmates. And, they were my first readers. They were the audience. And they would make comments. And then the books, I did other books which grew in popularity. They would be passed on, from all different classes in the high school. Then moved from my high school to other high schools. So I was notorious for writing. That's what I was known for. I mean, apart from that, I was a geek. I wasn't much to look at, but everybody knew Sue's books, so that's what I was popular for.
Very utilitarian naming as well. And,
Yeah.
so then what made you go into a career in finance?
So when at that time, there wasn't like a tertiary institution in Zimbabwe that was offering journalism, like a journalism degree. And my parents really wanted me to have a degree. I mean, they didn't, believe in having like a diploma or something. They were like, want you to go and get a degree. And so, you know, the options at the university I attended were limited at the time. I mean, they later did introduce like a degree in journalism, but by then I had gone, I'd finished. So it was mostly like was one of those things where I said, okay, fine, I have to do a degree. I looked at what was on offer. Finance seemed interesting. I knew nothing about it. So I knew marketing was marketing, and I thought my brother's already in marketing. I don't want to do what he's doing. And yeah, so that's basically how I picked finance. There didn't wasn't much thought behind it. I just thought it looks interesting, and that's how I got into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good as any young person trying to decide what to do. Something you don't know about seems like a good place to start.
Yeah.
So then, from that point till the point where you're now a scriptwriter for your day job, what was the transitional period between those 2 points?
So, the interesting thing was when I was in university, I still wanted to write. And that's actually when I began writing A Family Affair, except it wasn't called that at that time. So I wrote that book, the book in my first year of university. And I actually typed it because now, I had access to computer labs and I typed it, put it all together. And I actually sent, a query letter to a publisher. I think it was Penguin Random House. I don't know. I forget now. But and they responded and said, no, you need an agent. So I think, that was actually, I would say, my first attempt at seriously, thinking of getting published. But I never pursued it because then I started thinking, okay, how do I get an agent? And it seemed like such a roundabout, process. And I was still like, my first year of varsity, and I started school to focus on. So I kind of left it and I didn't pursue it. And then a few years down the line, I revisited the manuscript. I think a friend of mine read it and said, you know what, you should consider getting it published. So I thought, okay, fine. So I rewrote it again. By this time, I was working. I was in my first job and in corporate finance at the time. But anyway, I invested time. I rewrote the manuscript and I tried again. And then I got served, I think it was a 2-page rejection letter. And I was hurt. I was like, whoop, okay. So maybe I was delusional about this writing thing. And then my cousin was like, Sue, you know what? Let me read the letter. Let me read it. Because after that letter, I decided I don't want to write anymore. And this cousin of mine, obviously she's late now, she was like, but why did you stop writing? And I just said, no, I don't think it's for me. So she said, I mean, why? How did you come to that conclusion? So I said, look, I got this rejection letter and you read it. And she said, okay, let me read it and see. And then she went through it and said to me, you know what? They wouldn't have gone to all this trouble if there was nothing there. And I think try and, skim through it. Let's look at the positives and let's see what we can build from it. And so I think that gave me encouragement. So she was like, rewrite it, as they have suggested. And so I went back to the publisher. It was Viva Press. And Irene Swanson actually then said to me, look, send me a chapter at a time. Then I'll give you pointers. So rewrite the first chapter, for instance, in the book. So I rewrote to send it back and she would comment. Until about, I think, 10 chapters in, I was quite happy then to just proceed on my own. And yeah, so that was how another draft of A Family Affair came out. But then I still, never pursued it. I guess, when you're working and doing the writing thing as a sideline hobby, it never quite comes together. Because you always prioritize the work that pays and you think, okay, this is just a hobby. And, life gets in the way, life happens. And so it just, the manuscript went into the back burner, and I just, forgot about it basically. And then I moved to Johannesburg in 2008, which is when the GoldDiggers start. Okay. The book starts, the same time as I moved, my relocation. But I didn't jump fences, okay, like my character in the book. I actually came here on a work permit. And I started working in consulting, economic development consulting. And I think one afternoon I decided, you know what, it's been years, and I used to love writing. Why haven't I been writing? And I thought of Family Affair, maybe trying to pursue that. But then I thought I got a publisher, and he was like, "Why don't you rewrite the book with one sister instead of three? Drop the other two sisters, focus on one." And I said, "Fine," and I rewrote that book. And then that publisher died before we could even publish the book. So I shelved that project completely. And then I just decided, okay, let me continue. Let me write something new. Why not just start up something new? And that's how The Polygamist came to be. And I wrote it in about 6 months. It was a quick, it wasn't hard to write. At that time, I was still single. I didn't have a child. And I used to write on weekends. So I could start writing in the morning till midnight. no interruptions, and sometimes I forgot to eat. That's how absorbed I was in the project. And so I wrote it, and then I looked for an editor, Paula Murray, because I was told that's the process, right? Get it edited, and so I did that. And then Paula was like, "Okay, let's try and get it published." And she's also a published author, and she was like, "I know some people. Let me, send the manuscript around and see if there's any interest." And we did that whole process, and there wasn't any interest. And then she said to me, "Sue, I still believe it's a good book, and I think, you could self-publish and just put your name out there as a start. I mean, there's no need for you to just bury this project again." And so that's what I did, and that's how the Polygamist came to be. So it was self-published in 2012,
Okay.
and it's done extremely well. I mean, even till this day, I mean, it's still selling. It has had a long, long run, and I'm happy about that. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. So after the Polygamist, I then started doing research for the GoldDiggers, and I started, writing that. And then I fell pregnant, and that sort of like derailed me. But after I gave birth to my son, I got back into that. And because I was on maternity leave, I tried to write, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. I always had to, thinking that, my son would sleep and I would, have this time to write. It doesn't always work out that way. So in the end, I had to shelve the GoldDiggers for a while. And and then whilst I was on maternity leave, I actually got retrenched. So I couldn't even go back. I was, back to work. And so then a friend of mine who'd read The Polygamist, he's also a film, he's in production. He was keen on a film adaptation of The Polygamist. And so he said to me, "Look, I'm working on a TV series. Why don't you come and write?" And I was like, I didn't know how to write the TV. He's like, "No, you can write, so you'll be able to write." So that's actually how I got into the TV writing, was through that connection. And so I wrote in a series, and that kept me going whilst whilst I was unemployed, an unemployed mom. And I finally went back into corporate in 2015. So I went back. I was an equity research analyst. Got back into that fold, but I still thought, let me finish my book, because I was now in sort of like a structured sort of environment, and I could structure my day. So I went to work. I would come home, do my mom things, sleep, and then I'd write from about 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. every day to get that book finished. Because I'm one of those writers who requires a lot of silence when I write. It has to be quiet, And
no cafes.
Yeah, no, I don't do the cafe cappuccino laptop. You won't find me in like a Starbucks or anything like that. And so for me, that was the best time, that 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. every day. And that's how the GoldDiggers got finished. And so I was like, okay, it's done now. We look for a publisher. And so it was actually Pam. Pam said to me, "Try my publisher." And so I tried Penguin. Yeah, Penguin, yeah. And so I tried, and then they gave me the reader's report. They liked the book. They tried to pitch it to the rest of the team, and then it was a no. But then I used that. So I thought, okay, let me try other publishers. And I also shared the report. And then the second publisher said yes, but I didn't like the offer on the table. The third publisher was Pan Macmillan, and they said yes, and I liked the offer. And that's how Pan ended up publishing the GoldDiggers. So I moved from self-publishing to a traditional publisher. And that happened. So the GoldDiggers came out in 2018. Yeah, and I was still working full-time in corporate. And then I think a month before my 40th birthday, I got retrenched. But I think, in retrospect, I always say that was probably my saving grace. Because I think I was, quarter to burning out. I mean, you can't work those kind of hours, and write and have a child. It was just too much. So I think, that was my saving grace. And, it gave me time to just like, reset And so when the book came out, I could focus on that, the whole marketing and launching, and I could travel to festivals. So the timing for that was perfect. And then also at that time, I thought, you know what, let me look at a family affair again and see what I can do with it. And so I've spent, the last 2 years writing. And then, like I said before, I've done TV work, and I used to do it even when I was doing my equity research work. I still, did, side stunts with, I help people in production if they needed storyline. And Pam was like, you need to get back into that because, it's a way to earn a stable income. And also, you can still be creative. It doesn't stifle your creativity. So that's how I'm back into TV now. And I like the balance that, it affords me. I can actually, learn a living from my passion. I'm really passionate about telling stories, and TV is just another medium of telling stories. And so, so that's where I am. Yeah, that's where I am now to answer your question.
That's such an exciting journey, and so funny that it's almost not gone backwards, but that you started with what you've now most recently published.
Yeah.
When is the Polygamist movie coming out? Is it a series or a movie?
Well, initially it was a movie. It was optioned as a movie. But now I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, with the way things are with COVID, I don't know. TV seems to be bigger now. I mean, this, it was optioned many years ago. So I don't know, in terms of what that will come up as. I don't know what the idea is now. It probably will be a series, I think, because that's the thing now for most people. So I don't know where that is. I mean, it's been on, how it is, these things in development, and you don't know how long it will take for anything to actually happen. I mean, the GoldDiggers was also recently optioned, but that's going to be a series. I mean, the producer is seeing a series with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that your writing does lend itself well to series because each chapter is so personalized about each different character. It kind of lends itself well to episodes, and getting really kind of furrowing into the character and then moving on to what's happening with the next one. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on why. So the Polygamist is in first person and the other two in third person. Was that a practical choice because there's quite a lot of characters, certainly in the GoldDiggers, and there's a nice. I really enjoy the kind of symbolism of the Polygamist being all in the first person, even the different characters, because they're kind of all then connected, like they're connected in the real world with the same man, and why you made that decision.
Okay, so with the Polygamist, I chose the first person because, we're trying to get inside the heads of these women. And so for me, I thought that was the only way you could really be like intimate with the character.
Yeah.
And so that narrative worked. I thought it worked, for that kind of book. For the GoldDiggers, I mean, a lot of people said, why didn't you tell it in the first person? And I was like, I also didn't want to, I wanted to have like sort of a distance to the characters, and sort of, yeah. So that's why I chose,
Well, and the GoldDiggers is at parts so devastating. And so I imagine that writing it with a bit of distance is probably helpful for you.
Yeah, because I mean, it was a traumatic book to write. So even at that distance, because I mean, I remember writing parts of that book and I couldn't even see the screen through the blur of my tears at some point because it was very painful.
Yeah.
And I also think I had like a carryover of postnatal depression, and I think I just poured that into the book as well.
Not a great well, great for the book, but not for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so maybe we talk about that a little more, just why that book is so devastating. To give the audience some context, it's about people moving to Johannesburg from Zimbabwe to find their fortune. And in fact, that's where the name's significance comes in. Sue, I don't know if you want to maybe explain all the possible meanings the name could have for an international audience.
So the reason why the GoldDiggers is called that is simply because, if you think of the history of Johannesburg, people were lured here largely because of the gold, the first settlers. The city of Johannesburg as it is was built from gold. So that's why I thought that title was so apt, because people were drawn, to the city by gold. But now, even though gold is not the motivating factor, people still here migrate to Johannesburg for economic factors. So that's why, that title just was perfect for it, because although they're not looking for gold bars under the ground, they're still looking for gold in terms of wealth and prosperity. And that reason hasn't changed, whether someone's moving into provincial movement or people from the rest of the continent coming here. So that was just felt like the right title. Although it is a bit misleading, because a lot of the time that term gold diggers is used to refer to women, young women who look to marry rich older men for monetary reasons. But that's not what the book is about. Not at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that slightly misleading nature of it, because especially after reading The Polygamist, you do wonder whether it's a similar kind of story, but it's really not. And then I'd really like to know more about, to give the audience now some context, the story starts, and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but the story starts with a group of Zimbabweans illegally traveling into South Africa for work. They all come from completely different backgrounds. There's a child returning to her mother who's left earlier for similar reasons, and there's a civil engineering graduate, and there are people looking to go and do domestic work in the city. And yet somehow they all arrive and are immediately branded as having one history, which is foreign. And that is an issue that at the time that it was published was certainly an issue in South Africa. And I'm wondering why it was important for you to paint those pictures and paint those histories of each character who had completely different motivation for being there and kind of ended up in the same waiter jobs or living in the same townships.
Okay, it was important because I believe there isn't a single story about, people who leave Zimbabwe to come to Johannesburg. There are multiple stories. And I tried to tell as much as I could each of the different stories and the motivations. So each character, represents, a thread in terms of the migration. So you have the professionals that migrate. And not all the professionals are able to get work permits, because some of the skills, some permits are only given to critical skills. So there will still be other professionals who wish to migrate, but they can't get permits. So I felt that was represented in doing Sunny's journey. Then you have the wives, which I feel is such an important thread. And the wives, I'm talking about Portia. So you get a lot of men who migrate and they leave their wives behind. And this has been going on for years. I mean, I think of my own grandfather, my paternal grandfather, Stephen. I mean, he worked in the gold mines in Johannesburg many years ago. I mean, he's late now. But he would leave, and he would leave my grandmother at home, in the village. And he would be gone for 2-3 years. I mean, it wasn't easy for people to, when they came here, to just up and leave. So he would leave, be gone 2 years. Then he's back home at the village for Christmas, gets my grandmother pregnant, and he goes back to Johannesburg, gone for another 2-3 years. And that pattern continued until he retired. So what's interesting is that pattern still continues. You have men migrating. But now women are saying no, they're refusing to be left behind. They want to join the men where they're going. And so you now have women moving too, And so I felt that I needed to capture that trait. So Portia's character represents that, type of migration, women leaving to join their husbands. So each story, was important. The kids, the children, was also an extremely important story. So a lot of people, once again, they work here, they leave their children behind to be raised by grandparents. And a lot of the time, maybe the living quarters here are not, suitable for the kids to come and join them. And so they send for them. And sometimes the way those kids are sent for is not exactly the most suitable way. You just give your child to a transporter. It's not the safest passage, and children have disappeared. They've never reached their destination. So I thought that story was also extremely important to tell. And so, so each character was, I carefully thought about, what do they represent and what's, the ultimate story that I'm trying to tell my audience. And I did that with each character.
Yeah.
I don't want to go, give away.
Everyone must go and read it as well, because each character, while being so personable and individual in their own stories, also tells a story that so many other people have experienced. And there's just these threads, this weaving of these different experiences that so many people have endured. And it really does remind you that there isn't a reason why people make those kinds of decisions. And there's just so much desperation behind the decisions. I've then also found that you depict really wonderfully the juxtaposition between the cultural significance of things and then the modern African lifestyle. You for instance, in the family affair, you've got this beautiful wedding ceremony with designer dresses, followed by very intense cultural initiations that are still part of the groom's family's traditions, and you jump between that juxtaposition really well. Do you feel like you have to blend them, or is it just something that comes naturally from what you know?
Yeah, for me it's a natural progression. So you sort of have always the two residing together, like what they call the Western culture and our own tradition, and there's almost like a tension between the two. I didn't think about it like intentionally, I guess, but it came out that way. But I'm always aware of it, that tension that does exist, and I'm glad it's being portrayed well, in the book.
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't feel like they aren't one and the same at any point. They kind of just feel like a jarring points. There's certainly points of tension, but not that they don't fit.
Yeah.
You've really, really depicted that brilliantly. And is it important for you in your writing? And I know you're writing for a local audience, but they're very accessible for an international audience too. And is it important for you to keep language and tradition within your writing?
Yeah, that's very important, because I find at times there's some words that get lost in translation. So while I'm always cognizant of the fact that someone, who doesn't understand, our languages may read the book, I try and put it in such a way they can still infer meaning of what is being said, in the context of what is being said. Because, some phrases, some, words just, I don't know, they lose meaning once they translate it. And it's important for me to capture that, because I feel that if I don't do it, no one else will, no one else might write a family affair. So I think for me, that's the importance of having those phrases.
Yeah. And I mean, in your books are mostly in English, but if every character was speaking in the language that they would be speaking in, if that makes sense, how many languages would be in the book? Because there's Shona for a lot of the Zimbabweans, and there's obviously English, and there's the blending of a few. If every character was speaking in their own language, how many languages would be in the book?
It depends on the book. So the Polygamist, because it was set in Harare, which is predominantly Shona, the book reflected that. The GoldDiggers has Sesotho, Zulu, Venda, because I also wanted to show the transition because they migrate into another country. So I also wanted to showcase those languages. So I try and pick up like the language, in terms of the context of the book. Whereas in a family affair, it's a book based predominantly in Bulawayo, and where you do have a Xhosa community. So you have isiXhosa, you have isiNdebele in the book. Those are your predominant languages. So it's actually that is determined by the story itself and the characters in the book.
Yeah. Also, my next question would usually be kind of what's next, but I feel like given that a family affair was only published on the 1st of October, I think what's next is probably a bit of a nap and some breathing time. So what has the build up to publication been like in a lockdown setting? Has it been weird? Would you have had big launches and events and things that you can't have now?
Yeah, so the difference now is we can't have the big launch events now. We can only have a few physical events, and they have to be limited in terms of size. And
Right.
that I do understand. But we now have, virtual platforms like yours, for instance. So I can do an online launch now.
Yeah.
And my reach is much wider. So that's the advantage of what, virtual has also opened up. It's opened up other avenues that we didn't previously explore. So that's also nice. But in terms of, I think lockdown was good in terms of getting work done as well. You stayed at home. You actually did stuff. So I think it was for many writers. I think it was a productive time. I mean, I look at the number, books that have come out this year. Obviously they weren't started during lockdown, but I mean, probably a lot of work in terms of editing happened during lockdown. So I think it was a productive time.
I'm sure writers are listening to people saying, oh, and then I had to spend a whole day by myself. And writers are going, yeah, welcome to our lives.
But you're not really by yourself.
No, and if anything, writers have more company now.
Yeah, you have your friends that no one else can see.
No, absolutely. And so I think now would be a really great time, if you don't mind, to read a little passage from A Family Affair, if you've got it on you.
Did you have anything in mind that you want me to read?
No, I think anything you think wouldn't be too tempting enough for the audience to rush out and get it, but not too much of a spoiler. Maybe even just some of that beginning bit at the wedding.
Is it?
Would be interesting.
Okay, should I start with the opening?
Yes,
that's fine.
That's perfect.
Holy matrimony. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single woman of childbearing age must be in want of a husband. A truth that has been supplanted in the minds of many a woman, and a truth that Zandile wrestles with that fine summer morning in December. She finds refuge in the bathroom, far from the madding crowd, and wrings her hands nervously over the full towel skirt of a wedding dress spilling around her. She wonders whether it might not be too late to make a run for it. She's heard of weddings that carry on without the bride and groom. The guests could still salvage the occasion and make a party of it, and they could go straight to their honeymoon, a perfect escape from the craziness around her. She wants to get married, but she's not sure she wants this. Her family has been at war with one another since the whole wedding thing had begun. Every detail had been a bone of contention, from the venue to the guest list to the menu. As a young girl, she had dreamt about her wedding. She had spent countless evenings with her sisters, fantasizing about the kind of weddings they would all have. None of them included any noisy politics. Their fantasies had been fanciful and fairy tale-like. She looks up at the small window, but as slender as she is, there is no way she will be able to squeeze her body through it. She's stuck, and she feels like she's suffocating.
Brilliant. In fact, I'm so pleased you read that part because it also reminds me how much I enjoyed that Jane Austen-esque starting point. Another prime example of how you blend the kind of old world and the new world and the African cultures and blending everything together.
I love Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
And I always used to say Elizabeth changed her mind when she saw Pemberley. But anyway.
Yeah. No, that was a lovely reading. And I wonder, it also brings into mind this woman who must be in need of a husband, and all of your books have quite a strong misogynist element to them. And now, is this an issue you feel like you need to give commentary on, or is it something you think is so entrenched in reality that it just is part of the story when you're telling it?
So the context of that is, Zimbabwe is a patriarchal country. I was raised on patriarchy. So it would be dishonest not to, allude to it in my books. That's why it becomes a very, pertinent theme, because a lot of it is informs, what happens to women in society. So, I feel I need to, speak to it, because I was, raised on it. And for a long time, I've had to go through a phase of unlearning some of the things that, I was taught. So it's important for me to address it, because I believe a lot of the issues that we have are rooted in patriarchy.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how your female characters respond to it too, because often women are as entrenched in the patriarchal societal structures as men are. And these aunts who, in their little ceremony after the wedding, where they say, you will respect your husband, you will give him sex whenever he wants it, or else he'll leave you. There are evil women who will come and try and steal your men. Yeah. And it just shows how patriarchy has the power to turn women against each other as much rather than against men.
Yes, a lot of women are agents of patriarchy, and they used to enforce it, and I think I show that a lot in the book. How women have, are like the ambassadors of patriarchy and oppress other women in the process.
Yeah, well, you've really done an amazing job with all three books. I implore everyone to go and read them. Can you tell, and I'm sure South Africans can get the book in exclusive books and all good bookshops, but can an international audience get them all online?
Yeah, so all three of my books are available online on Amazon. So, for the international audiences, and I think the GoldDiggers, they can get on print on demand as well, for those who prefer the hard copies. The GoldDiggers is also available in Audible for those who prefer audiobooks. Yeah.
So Did you who narrated the audiobooks? Did you do that?
No. It was a lady called Malaika Ndlovu. She did the audiobook, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sue. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and it's been such a pleasure reading your books. And thank you to the audience for tuning in for the first time to Babble. We're so excited to be off the ground with this project. And so please let us know your thoughts and subscribe and like and share, and obviously beeline for the bookshop or the online equivalent to get your hands on Sue's books. And thank you and goodbye.